The early morning sun poured through the tall glass windows of the Olowo mansion, resting gently upon the marble floors that reflected its golden warmth. Birds sang softly in the distance, and the faint sound of water from the central fountain outside completed the symphony of peace that had become the rhythm of Sandra Olowo Kenneth's life. To many, Sandra was the very definition of grace and privilege, the only child of Chief and Mrs. Olowo, owners of Olowo Global Holdings, a multi-billion-dollar empire that spanned real estate, fashion, and logistics. When her parents passed away 5 years earlier, she inherited everything. Her heart, however, found its anchor not in wealth but in Kenneth, the man she had fallen in love with long before her parents' demise. Sandra and Kenneth had been married for 5 beautiful years. To outsiders, theirs was the perfect union, a picture painted with love, respect, and trust. Kenneth, tall, confident, and business-savvy, had taken charge of managing her parents' empire. He had proven himself worthy in every way. He was the kind of husband every woman desired, the man who opened doors, left love notes by her bedside, and never forgot her birthdays. Inside the mansion, laughter was often the soundtrack of their evenings. Sandra, though a woman of power and influence, was remarkably humble. She loved to cook her own meals, especially Kenneth's favorite coconut rice with spicy grilled chicken. That morning, as the aroma of sizzling onions filled the kitchen, Sandra hummed along to a soft tune playing from the Bluetooth speaker. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the spicy steam rising from the pot. Her apron, white with floral prints, fluttered slightly as she stirred the sauce, smiling at the memory of how Kenneth had once joked that he married her for her cooking. On the dining table lay Kenneth's laptop, sleek, silver, and always neatly arranged. Normally, Sandra respected his space, never going near his personal gadgets. Trust was sacred in their marriage. But today was different. She had an urgent email to send to a foreign client concerning one of their logistics subsidiaries. Her own laptop and phone were upstairs charging, and time was ticking. Kenneth's computer sat open, the screen glowing faintly. Just a quick email, she muttered to herself, wiping her hands on her apron before sitting down. She opened the browser and quickly typed her email. Everything was smooth until ping. A new message popped up at the bottom corner of the screen. The notification read, "From Barrister Adams, subject, divorce plans, final draft." Sandra froze. Her heart skipped several beats. At first, she thought it must be a mistake. Perhaps the message wasn't what it seemed. Curiosity warred with fear, but something within her urged her to click. Her fingers trembled as she opened the email. Her world shattered in a single breath. The message was a detailed outline of Kenneth's divorce plan, complete with division of assets, legal language about company ownership, and arrangements for seamless control transfer. It even contained phrases like, "Sandra must not suspect until the final documents are ready," and "all shares will reflect your name by month end." Sandra sat still, staring at the words, her mind spinning. The sound of boiling rice in the kitchen faded into the background. Her chest tightened, her stomach turned. 5 years, she had trusted this man with everything, her fortune, her legacy, her life. And here he was, plotting to take it all away. Tears welled in her eyes but refused to fall. She closed the laptop carefully, wiped her trembling hands, and turned off the gas stove. Every sound felt louder now, the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the beating of her own heart. She took a deep breath, whispering to herself, "No, Sandra, you can't break down now." Not yet. That evening, when Kenneth returned from work, she greeted him as she always did, with a gentle hug and a warm smile. Her acting was flawless. She laughed at his jokes, served him dinner, and listened to him talk about business expansion. All the while, her mind replayed the betrayal like a cruel movie. Later that night, when Kenneth was fast asleep beside her, Sandra lay awake staring at the ceiling. The moonlight spilled across his face, calm and unsuspecting. How could he sleep so peacefully knowing what he planned? Silently, she picked up his phone from the bedside table. Her fingers hesitated before unlocking it. Kenneth's password was the date of their wedding, such irony. Inside his phone lay the truth she both feared and needed. Dozens of messages between Kenneth and Barrister Adams, discussing assets, timelines, and legal manipulation. Her heart ached with every scroll. But one name caught her attention: Hellen. Her best friend. The chat history between Kenneth and Hellen was long, some more casual, some flirtatious. The more she read, the more her stomach tightened. The timestamps showed late-night calls, private meetings, and messages like, "I can't wait till this is over and we're finally free." Sandra covered her mouth to keep from screaming. The man she loved and the friend she trusted had become the architects of her downfall. By dawn, Sandra had gathered every screenshot, every piece of evidence, and sent them to her personal lawyer, Barrister Ocone. She attached a note. "Handle this quietly. Secure what is mine. I will not confront him yet." When Kenneth woke up, she greeted him cheerfully, just as she always did. He kissed her forehead, smiled, and left for work unaware that the woman he had planned to destroy was already 2 steps ahead. After breakfast, Sandra drove to the corporate headquarters of Olowo Global Holdings. The tall glass building stood as a monument of her parents' success and now, of Kenneth's deceit. But what awaited her inside would shake her even more. The receptionist, a young lady in a blue suit, looked up and smiled politely. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you?" Sandra straightened her shoulders. "I'd like to see my husband, Mr. Kenneth Olowo. Tell him Sandra is here." The receptionist frowned slightly, then forced a polite smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Kenneth's wife is currently in a meeting. You must be mistaken." Sandra blinked, confused. "Excuse me? I am his wife." The receptionist chuckled awkwardly. "No, madam. I've worked here for 6 months. I know his wife. She visits often." "Who is she?" Sandra's voice trembled. The receptionist hesitated, then said quietly, "Her name is Mrs. Hellen Kenneth." For a moment, Sandra thought her heart would stop beating. She turned away, eyes burning, and walked out of the building in silence. The guards at the door greeted her, but she couldn't respond. In the car, she sat motionless for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, tears of betrayal, humiliation, and rage. But then something inside her shifted. Her parents' voices echoed in her mind, her father's wisdom, her mother's strength. She wiped her tears, straightened up, and whispered, "They took my kindness for weakness. They will see my strength soon." As she drove away from the building that once symbolized her love and trust, Sandra knew one thing: she would not go down quietly. The game had changed, and she was now ready to play. The mansion was unusually quiet that morning. Even the birds outside seemed reluctant to sing. Sandra sat in the living room, still wearing her robe, staring blankly at the large portrait of her parents that hung above the fireplace. Their smiles once brought her comfort, but today they felt like silent witnesses to her pain. The discovery she had made the day before haunted her like a recurring nightmare. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Kenneth's name beside her best friend's in those secret messages. She could still hear the receptionist's words echoing in her head. "Mrs. Hellen Kenneth." For a long while, she sat motionless, her coffee turning cold on the table. The maids went about their duties quietly, sensing something was wrong, but too afraid to ask. Sandra's mind replayed every moment of her marriage, the laughter, the gifts, the promises whispered under the stars. Were they all lies? Her phone vibrated softly. It was a message from Barrister Ocone, her family lawyer. "Good morning, Madam Sandra. I received your evidence. I've started filing claims to secure your core assets, especially the real estate and majority company shares. I advise you to remain silent for now. The law is already on your side." Sandra exhaled, relief washing over her. At least something was under control, she thought. But her heart still bled. Later that morning, Kenneth walked into the living room, cheerful as ever. Dressed sharply in a navy blue suit, he looked every bit the charming executive she once admired. "Good morning, my beautiful wife," he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "You look worried. Everything okay?" Sandra smiled faintly. "Just tired, Kenneth. Too many reports to review." He chuckled. "You worry too much. You should leave all that business stress to me. That's what I'm here for." Her heart clenched. "Yes," she thought bitterly, "to take everything from me." She nodded slowly. "You're right, love. I'll rest more." As Kenneth left, Sandra watched him through the window as his car disappeared down the driveway. Her face hardened. The man she once trusted had become a stranger. But she wasn't the kind of woman who surrendered easily. By afternoon, she gathered herself and visited her lawyer's office in Ikoyi. Barrister Ocone, a middle-aged man with gray-streaked hair and a calm demeanor, welcomed her warmly. "Madam Sandra, you did well to act quickly," he said, offering her a seat. "I've gone through the documents. Your husband has been transferring some properties under his name, but not all are lost." Sandra leaned forward. "How soon can we stop him?" He adjusted his glasses. "We've already frozen a portion of the company's shares. Some assets, however, are still pending verification. Once we obtain the final injunction, He won't be able to touch a single naira without your consent. Sandra exhaled slowly. Thank you, barrister. I want everything handled quietly. I don't want him to know I'm aware. Of course, Okon assured. Keep living normally. Let him think you're still the trusting wife. Sandra smiled weakly. That won't be hard. I've become a good actress lately. That evening, when Kenneth returned home, Sandra welcomed him with open arms and a warm dinner. The table was set elegantly candles, fine china, and red wine. Kenneth, oblivious to the storm brewing behind her calm eyes, laughed as they ate. You're glowing tonight, he teased. Did something good happen? Sandra smiled sweetly. Yes. I realized I've been too distant lately. I want to make more time for us. Kenneth's eyes softened. That's my girl. She watched him eat, every gesture etched in her mind. To him, she was still the gentle, naive Sandra, but to herself, she had transformed into a woman of steel. When he fell asleep later that night, she quietly slipped out of bed again. She needed more evidence, something deeper. She unlocked his phone and began going through hidden folders in his email. Her pulse raced as she found more confidential files, business transfer deeds, property agreements, and even messages to foreign clients arranging to sell some of her assets abroad. Her anger grew with every discovery. The betrayal was not just emotional, it was financial warfare. She forwarded every document to her personal account, labeling them carefully. Then she placed his phone back exactly as she found it. As she turned to leave, she caught her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes looked tired, but fierce. The innocence was gone, replaced by resolve. The next morning, Sandra sat by the window sipping tea when her phone rang. It was Hellen. For a moment, Sandra froze. How could she talk to the woman who had stabbed her in the back? But curiosity and strategy made her answer. Hellen, good morning, Sandra said, her voice calm but guarded. Morning, dear. Helen's cheerful tone was almost insulting. It's been forever. How are you? I'm fine. Just busy with work, Sandra replied evenly. That's my hard-working friend, Hellen laughed. Listen, I've been meaning to visit. Kenneth told me you've both been doing great. I miss you. Sandra forced a smile, though her chest burned. We miss you too, Hellen. Maybe you should come around soon. I'll try, dear. Love to Kenneth. Sure, Sandra replied and ended the call. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the phone down. Love to Kenneth? The nerve. She could barely breathe from the rage bubbling inside her. But she remembered her lawyer's words. Stay quiet. 2 days later, Sandra decided to pay a surprise visit to Kenneth's office again. She wanted to see, with her own eyes, how deep this betrayal went. The moment she walked into the building, she could feel the stares. The security guard at the entrance hesitated before greeting her. The new receptionist smiled awkwardly, as if unsure how to address her. Sandra kept her head high and strode toward the elevator. Tell your boss's wife is here, she said calmly. The receptionist frowned. Madam, his wife just left a few minutes ago. Sandra froze. What did you just say? Yes, Mrs. Hellen Kenneth. She was here earlier. She even signed some documents. A heavy silence filled the air. Sandra turned slowly, her pulse thundering. Without a word, she walked back to her car, her mind spinning. So she's been parading as me. Using my name. My company. My husband. As she sat behind the wheel, a tear slid down her cheek. But this time it wasn't out of sorrow. It was fury, cold, burning fury. That night, Sandra couldn't sleep. She sat by her desk, surrounded by legal papers, property deeds, and printed evidence. Every file was a piece of the puzzle that would expose Kenneth and Hellen. She carefully arranged them in order before sending digital copies to Barrister Okon. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Okon. Madam Sandra, everything is progressing well. We've secured 60% of the holdings. You'll regain legal control soon. But remain calm, they must not suspect anything yet. Sandra's lips curved into a faint smile. They won't, she whispered to herself. They'll think they've won until the final moment. She looked at the photo of her parents again, her voice soft but firm. Papa, Mama, they won't destroy what you built. I promise. In the distance, the sound of Kenneth's car pulling into the driveway broke the silence. She wiped her eyes, stood, and put on her calmest face. Kenneth walked in, smiling as usual. Hey, sweetheart, still awake? Yes, she said gently. Just finishing some emails. He nodded and wrapped his arms around her. You work too hard, Sandra. She smiled faintly and leaned into his chest, her mind whispering, enjoy the peace, Kenneth. It won't last much longer. The following morning dawned bright and calm, but inside Sandra's chest, a storm brewed silently. Her eyes were heavy from lack of sleep, yet her mind was sharper than ever. The betrayal of Kenneth and Hellen had pierced her heart deeply, but it had also awakened something powerful inside her resolve. She moved through the mansion like a ghost, avoiding the curious stares of her maids. Her morning routine was different today. No elaborate breakfast, no cheerful greetings. She wore a simple black dress and dark sunglasses, her expression unreadable. She had made a decision overnight today. She would face the truth head-on. Kenneth had told her he had a meeting at the company that morning. It was the perfect opportunity to confirm what she already suspected. She picked up her phone and dialed Barrister Ocone. "Good morning, Barrister," she said softly. "Good morning, Madam Sandra. I was about to call you. We've secured full control of your father's real estate investments, and the paperwork for the remaining subsidiaries is in progress." "Thank you," Sandra replied. "I'm going to the office today." There was a pause on the other end. "Is that wise?" "Yes," she said firmly. "I need to see what he's done to the company with my own eyes." Barrister Ocone sighed. "All right, but please be cautious. Don't confront him yet. Remember, silence is your weapon." Sandra smiled faintly. "I know, Barrister. Don't worry, I'm not there to fight. I'm there to observe." The drive to Olowo Global Holdings was long and tense. Every turn of the road seemed to echo her parents' memories the first time her father brought her to the office as a little girl. How proud he was to show her the company that bore their name. When she arrived, the building stood tall as ever, gleaming under the morning sun. But it felt different now, cold, unfamiliar, as though it had forgotten her. Sandra stepped out of her car and walked through the glass doors. The receptionist from before looked up, her expression a mix of confusion and discomfort. "Good morning," Sandra said politely. "Good morning, ma'am. I'm here to see Mr. Kenneth Olowo." The receptionist hesitated. "I'm sorry, madam, but Mr. Kenneth is in a meeting," and Sandra cut her off gently. "Tell him his wife is here. He'll want to see me." The receptionist bit her lip and lowered her voice. "Madam, I already told you last time Mr. Kenneth's wife came earlier. She's in the boardroom right now." Sandra's eyes narrowed. "You mean Hellen?" The receptionist looked startled. You know her?" "Oh, I know her very well," Sandra said coolly. More than she could ever imagine. She turned and began walking toward the boardroom, ignoring the receptionist's protests. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, echoing through the hallway like thunder. When she reached the glass boardroom door, she saw them, Kenneth and Hellen, sitting side by side at the head of the long table, addressing a group of board members. Hellen wore an elegant navy blue suit, her hair perfectly styled, her expression confident, too confident. Sandra's blood boiled. Through the glass, she could see the smiles, the laughter, the way Kenneth leaned slightly toward Hellen as she spoke. The sight was enough to break any woman, but not Sandra, not anymore. She pushed open the door. The room fell silent instantly. Every eye turned toward her. Kenneth's face drained of color. Hellen froze, her lips parting in shock. "Sandra?" Kenneth stammered. "What are you doing here?" Sandra smiled faintly. "Just visiting my company, darling." The board members exchanged confused glances. Hellen quickly stood up, her voice trembling slightly. "This is a private meeting, Sandra. You can't just walk in here." Sandra turned to her slowly, her voice calm but sharp. "Private meeting? In my father's company? That's interesting." Kenneth cleared his throat, forcing a nervous smile. "Honey, please. Let's talk outside." But Sandra didn't move. "No, Kenneth. I think we should talk right here, with everyone present." The tension was thick. The board members looked uncomfortable, unsure of what was happening. Hellen's hands fidgeted as she tried to maintain her composure. Sandra walked closer to the table, her eyes burning with restrained fury. "It's funny how I've been hearing rumors that I no longer own what my parents built. That someone else sits in my place, signs my documents, and calls herself Mrs. Kenneth." Hellen's face turned pale. "Sandra, you're misunderstanding everything." "Am I?" Sandra said sharply. "Then maybe you can explain why the receptionist thinks you are Kenneth's wife. Or why my company shares are being transferred behind my back. Or why—" "Sandra, enough!" Kenneth snapped suddenly, slamming his hand on the table. "This is not the time or place for this drama." Sandra's eyes locked onto his. "You're right. It's not drama, it's the truth." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small folder. Calmly, she dropped it on the table. "Inside are copies of the documents you've been signing, Kenneth. And the chat history between you and Hellen. Every single word." Kenneth froze. Hellen's knees went weak, and she sat down abruptly. Sandra looked around the room, her voice steady and composed. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry for this interruption. But as of today, there's been a serious breach of trust and identity within this company. However, the law will handle it. For now, consider this meeting adjourned. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked out. The room erupted in whispers. Down in the lobby, Sandra's phone buzzed again. It was Barrister Ocone. Madam Sandra, his calm voice said, the court has granted a temporary restraining order against Kenneth. He can no longer sign, sell, or move any company asset until the case is resolved. Sandra stopped walking and closed her eyes, breathing deeply. Thank you, Barrister. You have no idea how much that means. He continued. Also, we discovered something new. One of your late father's trusted accountants told us Kenneth replaced the entire executive team months ago, all loyal to him. But with this order, we'll regain full control soon. Sandra opened her eyes, determination returning to her face. Then it's time to clean house. When she got home that evening, the mansion felt different. Kenneth wasn't there yet, but his presence still lingered, the smell of his cologne, his half-read books, the empty glass on the side table. She walked upstairs and stood in front of the mirror, removing her earrings slowly. Her reflection stared back, not the naive wife who once believed love was enough, but a woman reborn through pain. She whispered to herself, they thought I would break. But I'm just getting started. Her phone rang again. This time it was Hellen. Sandra hesitated before answering. Sandra, please, I can explain everything. Hellen's voice pleaded through the receiver. It's not what you think. Sandra laughed softly, a humorless sound. Oh, it's exactly what I think, Hellen. I saw it with my own eyes. You don't understand. Hellen cried. Kenneth said you were done with the marriage. He told me. Sandra cut her off sharply. He told you what you wanted to hear. You betrayed me, Hellen. And you'll live to regret it. The warning and the betrayal. She ended the call and threw her phone onto the bed. For the first time, tears streamed freely down her face, not of weakness, but release. That night, she wrote in her journal. They stole my trust, but not my strength. They took my love, but not my legacy. I will rise, and when I do, they will kneel before the truth. Outside, thunder rolled faintly, as if the heavens themselves acknowledged her vow. Sandra turned off the lights, lay in bed, and whispered one last thought before sleep claimed her. Tomorrow, the battle begins. Hello, guys. Thank you for watching this video till now. Please share your thoughts about Sandra's reaction to her husband's betrayal and her best friend, Hellen. We will be waiting to hear from you in the comments. Please take the time to click on the subscribe button to see more of our stories. Thank you. Let's continue with our story. The following morning dawned gray, heavy clouds lingering over the mansion, as if the heavens themselves shared Sandra's gloom. She had spent the night tossing in bed, haunted by the memory of Hellen's trembling voice over the phone and Kenneth's shocked face at the office. Sleep had eluded her. Her heart was too heavy, her mind too restless. As she prepared her tea, she caught her reflection in the kitchen window, weary but unbroken. Her hair was tied in a neat bun, and though her eyes were red from sleeplessness, there was a fire in them that even betrayal couldn't extinguish. Just as she was about to sit down, her phone rang. The name that flashed on the screen made her chest tighten. Hellen. She hesitated for a moment, then picked up. Hello. Sandra. Hellen's voice was soft, uncertain. I know you hate me right now, but please, can we meet? I just need 5 minutes to explain. Sandra took a long breath. There's nothing to explain, Hellen. I saw the messages. I saw you at the company. I know, Hellen replied quickly, her voice trembling. I'm not denying what you saw. But please, not everything is how it looks. Just 5 minutes. Please. Silence hung between them. Sandra finally said, Fine. The cafe near Kenneth's office. 11 a.m. sharp. I'll be there, Hellen whispered and hung up. The drive to the cafe felt endless. The streets of Ikoyi were bustling as usual, honking cars, vendors shouting, and the scent of roasted plantain in the air, yet everything seemed distant, muted, unreal. When Sandra arrived, Hellen was already seated by the window, wearing dark sunglasses and a simple gown. She looked nervous, her hands clutching a cup of untouched coffee. Sandra walked in gracefully, her presence calm but commanding. The waiter greeted her politely as she sat opposite her former best friend. For a moment, neither spoke. The tension between them was thick enough to slice. Finally, Hellen sighed and took off her sunglasses. Sandra, I know you'll never forgive me. But I need you to know I never planned for things to go this far. Sandra's expression didn't change. Go on. Hellen looked down at her fingers. When Kenneth started coming to me after your parents' death, he said you were drowning in work and grief. He made me believe he was trying to help you. I didn't mean to fall for him. It just happened. Sandra's eyes narrowed. So now betrayal is something that just happens. Tears welled in Hellen's eyes. I was weak, Sandra. I was lonely too. But Kenneth changed. He became obsessed with power. He started talking about taking over the company, about divorcing you quietly, so he could control everything. I told him it was wrong, but he said it was already in motion. Sandra leaned back slowly, her gaze cold. And you stayed with him anyway. Hellen wiped her eyes. I thought I could stop him. But I was wrong. Now he's not the man I knew. He's dangerous, Sandra. Be careful. Things aren't as simple as you think. Sandra's heart raced at the warning. What do you mean by dangerous? Hellen hesitated, looking around nervously. Just watch your back. I can't say more now. Her phone buzzed suddenly. She glanced at the screen and paled. I have to go. Hellen. Sandra called as she stood abruptly, but Hellen was already halfway to the door. Sandra sat back, confused and unsettled. What did she mean by dangerous? She wondered. The meeting had raised more questions than answers. The next morning, Sandra woke early with a heavy feeling in her chest. She couldn't shake off Hellen's last words. Be careful. It echoed in her mind like a haunting riddle. She decided to return to the cafe the same spot, the same time, not to meet Hellen this time, but to observe. Something inside her told her there was more to uncover. Wearing a plain t-shirt and dark glasses, she sat at the far end of the cafe where she could see the parking lot that belonged to her company. She ordered coffee and waited. Minutes turned into an hour. She was about to leave when a familiar black Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. Her breath caught in her throat. It was Kenneth's car. She leaned slightly forward, watching carefully. The driver's door opened and out stepped Hellen, elegantly dressed in a red gown. Moments later, Kenneth came out from the passenger side. Sandra's eyes widened as she watched them exchange a few words, and then to her horror kiss passionately before parting ways. Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. Her chest burned with rage, disbelief, and heartbreak all at once. So this was her warning? The danger was me discovering the truth? Hellen entered the cafe briefly, perhaps to pick something up, while Kenneth drove away. Sandra lowered her head, trying not to be seen. Every cell in her body screamed with fury, but she forced herself to stay calm. She pulled out her phone, took several photos, and sent them immediately to Barrister Okon with a single message. Add this to the evidence file. Moments later, her lawyer replied. Understood. The case is now beyond doubt. You'll regain total control soon. Sandra sat there for a long while, staring at the photos. The pain was unbearable, but the proof gave her power. They took my love, my company, my trust. But they won't take my dignity, she thought. 2 days later, she received a call from Barrister Okon. Madam Sandra, I have great news. The court has ruled in your favor for immediate reinstatement as CEO and legal custodian of all assets under your family's name. Kenneth's access will be revoked immediately. Sandra's lips trembled, but she smiled faintly. Thank you, Barrister. I knew justice would find its way. That same day, she dressed in a sharp black suit and headed to the company headquarters. This time, she wasn't going as a wife, she was going as the rightful owner. When she walked through the doors, every eye turned toward her. Even the receptionist, who once dismissed her, stood up in shock. Madam, good morning, the receptionist stammered. Sandra's voice was calm but commanding. Good morning. Tell everyone in the boardroom that the real Mrs. Kenneth Sandra Olowo, rightful owner of Olowo Global Holdings, has arrived. Her heels clicked against the marble as she walked toward the elevator. Her confidence filled the room like a storm. When she stepped into the boardroom, Kenneth was there, and so was Hellen. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Kenneth's face twisted in disbelief. Sandra, what are you doing here? Reclaiming what's mine, she replied coolly. Hellen stood, her face pale. Sandra, please. Sandra raised a hand. Don't. Not another word. Then she turned to Kenneth, her voice steady. You've been planning this for months, haven't you? The fake transfers, the new staff, the lies? You even replaced me in my own company with her. She glanced sharply at Hellen. Kenneth clenched his fists. You don't know what you're talking about. The company's under my leadership now. Before he could continue, the door opened. Barrister Okon entered, carrying a thick folder. He walked straight to Sandra's side and placed the documents on the table. Mr. Kenneth, Okon said firmly. As of this morning, all legal rights to Olowo Global Holdings and its assets have been restored to Mrs. Sandra Olowo Kenneth. You no longer have any authority here. The color drained from Kenneth's face. Hellen covered her mouth, trembling. Sandra turned to them both, her voice calm but final. I trusted you with everything, Kenneth. I loved you. And you, Hellen, I called you my sister. But you both turned my love into a weapon against me. Now live with the consequences. Kenneth bowed his head in shame. Hellen fell to her knees, sobbing. Sandra, please forgive me, Hellen cried. I was blinded by jealousy. I never wanted it to go this far. Sandra's eyes softened for a moment, but then hardened again. Forgiveness doesn't erase betrayal, Hellen. You both made your choices. Now I'm making mine. She turned to her lawyer. Barrister, see them out of my building. Without another glance, she walked out, her heels echoing behind her like a victory drumbeat. That night, Sandra sat on her balcony, sipping wine as the cool breeze brushed against her face. The city lights sparkled below her, reflecting the new life she was about to begin. She had lost so much, but in truth, she had gained something greater: clarity. The betrayal had nearly broken her, but it also rebuilt her into a woman of steel, wisdom, and purpose. She whispered softly to herself, I forgive them, but I'll never forget. And I'll never trust blindly again. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled once more, not a warning this time, but an echo of her triumph. The morning after the boardroom showdown was eerily quiet. The mansion that once echoed with laughter and love now felt hollow, filled only with the distant hum of the city outside. Sandra sat by her window, her cup of coffee untouched, staring into the fog that draped the skyline. She had won her company back, but not her peace. Not yet. There were still questions burning inside her. How much had Kenneth stolen? How deep did Hellen's betrayal go? And most painfully, why did they both choose deceit over honesty? Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of thought. It was Barrister Okon. Madam, we've completed the audit, he said, his voice serious. The embezzlement runs deeper than we thought. Kenneth transferred several assets to an offshore account under Hellen's name. We have full documentation. Sandra clenched her jaw, her fingers tightening around the phone. So they planned everything together. Yes, Okon confirmed. They built a second company, Olakan Enterprises, registered secretly in Ghana. Your funds fueled it. We can press full criminal charges if you wish. Sandra exhaled slowly. No, not yet. I'll deal with them in my own way first. Understood, Okon said. Just remember, the law stands with you now. She ended the call and sat silently for a while. Justice through law would expose them, she thought. But justice through truth would destroy them. Her decision was made. That evening, Sandra organized an emergency meeting at the company's headquarters. She instructed the staff to ensure that both Kenneth and Hellen were informed but not warned. The message was simple. Mandatory appearance by all senior executives. Attendance is non-negotiable. The boardroom was full by 7 p.m. The air buzzed with tension. Whispers rippled through the staff who were still in shock from the previous day's revelation. Then the door opened. Sandra entered, wearing a pristine white suit that contrasted with the dark walls. Her steps were deliberate, her posture regal. Behind her, Barrister Okon carried a file and a sealed envelope. Everyone fell silent. Moments later, Kenneth walked in, followed hesitantly by Hellen. They both looked pale, as though walking to their own trial. Sandra's eyes didn't move from them. You came. Good. Let's end this. Kenneth swallowed hard. Sandra, this meeting isn't necessary. We can talk privately. No, she replied sharply. Everything that happened in darkness will now face the light. She turned to the room. Ladies and gentlemen, you all know me, or at least you used to. I'm Sandra Olowo, daughter of late Chief Olowo and rightful CEO of this empire. For months, I was deceived by the man I loved and betrayed by the friend I trusted. But no more. Gasps spread across the room. Hellen's hands trembled as she tried to speak. Sandra, please. Sandra raised her hand. You'll get your turn. She nodded to Barrister Okon, who stepped forward and placed several documents on the table. These are bank statements, transaction receipts, and registration certificates, he said. They prove that Mr. Kenneth Olowo and Miss Hellen Ogre embezzled over 2 billion naira from company accounts to fund a fake business under their control. The board members erupted in disbelief. What? 2 billion? Impossible. Sandra's gaze was locked on Kenneth. You had everything, Kenneth. A loving wife. A life built on trust. My parents' legacy was yours to protect. but you threw it all away for greed. Kenneth's face twisted in guilt and anger. I did what I had to. You were too emotional, Sandra. You ran the company like it was a family kitchen. I built it into something greater. Sandra stepped closer, her voice low but firm. You built nothing but a cage for yourself. She then turned to Hellen, whose mascara streaked down her cheeks. And you sat at my table, slept in my house, called me sister, yet you stabbed me where I trusted you most. Hellen broke down completely. I was weak, Sandra. Kenneth promised me love, promised me a future. I didn't realize until too late that I was just a pawn. Sandra stared at her, tears glistening in her eyes but never falling. You realized, but you stayed. You watched me lose everything and said nothing. Hellen sank to her knees. Please, please forgive me. Sandra turned her face away. Forgiveness isn't yours to ask for yet. She turned back to the staff. Let me be clear, this company will no longer be ruled by lies. Every stolen kobo will be recovered. Every deceitful act will be punished lawfully. She handed a document to Okon. Effective immediately, both Kenneth and Hellen are stripped of all company privileges, and their assets are frozen pending investigation. Kenneth's composure shattered. You can't do this. I still own shares. Okon smiled faintly. Correction, you did. You signed a transfer agreement 2 months ago to your wife. Sandra's lips curved slightly. You thought I wouldn't find your secret deals. But your arrogance was your undoing. The security team entered quietly. Sandra gave them a small nod. Escort them out. As the guards approached, Kenneth lost control. Sandra, you'll regret this. You can't humiliate me like this. She looked him in the eye. I'm not humiliating you, Kenneth. I'm freeing myself from your chains. As the guards led him away, his voice echoed down the hallway, filled with anger and defeat. Hellen remained behind, sobbing uncontrollably. Sandra, please, I've lost everything. I have nowhere to go. Sandra looked at her long and hard. For a moment, she saw not the traitor, but the friend she once had, the laughter they shared, the secrets they told under moonlight. Life has a way of teaching us through pain, Hellen, Sandra said softly. I learned mine. Now it's your turn. Then she turned away, leaving Hellen crumpled on the floor. Hours later, the boardroom was empty except for Sandra and Okon. The lawyer placed a hand on her shoulder. You did what had to be done. But remember, real victory isn't in revenge. It's in rebuilding. Sandra nodded slowly. I know, but sometimes to rebuild, you must first burn what's rotten. They shared a silent understanding. Outside, rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier, washing the dust off the city streets. Sandra walked out to her car, letting the cool droplets touch her skin. She looked up at the stormy sky and whispered, Thank you, God, for giving me the strength to see this day. That night, she returned home to the same balcony where she once sat heartbroken. But this time, the air felt different, lighter, freer. She opened her laptop and began typing. A new document appeared on the screen titled, Rebirth, the Sandra Olowo Foundation for Women in Business. She smiled faintly. This is where my new story begins. The betrayal had ended. The confrontation was over. But a new mission had just begun to help other women who had lost everything find their strength again. She closed her laptop, poured a glass of red wine, and whispered into the night. Let them keep their guilt. I'll keep my peace. The sun rose gently over the Olowo mansion, painting the sky in strokes of gold and rose. For the first time in months, Sandra woke up to the sound of peace, not silence, not fear, but true peace. The weight that had pressed on her chest for weeks had lifted. She stood by the window, watching the light spill across the city skyline. The storm was finally over, and she had survived it all, the lies, the betrayal, the heartbreak. Now, all that remained was rebirth. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Barrister Okon again. Madam Sandra, he said cheerfully. I thought I'd be the one to give you good news first thing this morning. Sandra smiled softly. You always do, Barrister. What is it this time? The court just ruled in your favor. Kenneth's appeal has been dismissed, and all diverted assets are officially back under your name. You now own full control of the Olowo estate, both locally and abroad. Sandra's lips parted in surprise. All of it. Every single asset, ma'am. Justice has spoken. She closed her eyes, a wave of relief washing over her. Thank you, Barrister. You've been more than my lawyer, you've been my shield. No, ma'am, he replied warmly. You were your own shield. I only guided the law. Sandra chuckled softly. Then I guess it's time I guided my future. Later that day, Sandra arrived at the company headquarters. The entire staff stood at attention as she walked through the main doors, no longer the quiet, naive wife of Kenneth, but the commanding CEO, radiating confidence and grace. Her once uncertain steps now carried authority. She could feel the admiration in their eyes. Many had seen the drama unfold, yet none could deny the respect they now felt for her. Inside the boardroom, the senior executives awaited her. Among them were some of the older directors who had served under her father. "Good morning, everyone," Sandra greeted, her voice calm and steady. "Good morning, Madam Sandra," they chorused. She took her seat at the head of the table, her rightful place, and smiled faintly. Let's begin the new chapter of Olowo Global Holdings. The first item on the agenda was restructuring. Sandra announced new transparency policies, stricter auditing procedures, and a mentorship initiative for young female entrepreneurs. "This company was born out of honesty, hard work, and compassion," she said, her tone commanding. "My parents built it not just for profit, but for people. That spirit will guide us again." The executives nodded in agreement, many visibly inspired. One of them, an elderly man who had worked with her father, stood and said, "Your father would be proud of you, Madam Sandra. You've restored honor to this company." Sandra smiled, blinking back tears. "Thank you, Mr. Adewale. That means more than you know." After the meeting, Sandra visited the top-floor balcony overlooking the city. The wind brushed against her face, carrying the scent of rain and renewal. She looked down at the streets below, remembering every painful step that had brought her here. She whispered to herself, "Pain is not the end, it's the beginning of strength." Her thoughts drifted briefly to Kenneth and Hellen. She had heard from her lawyer that Kenneth had left the country, humiliated and bankrupt, while Hellen had moved away quietly, broken and alone. But Sandra didn't feel hatred anymore, only pity. She had learned that revenge was not in destroying others. It was in reclaiming yourself. 2 weeks later, she hosted a press conference announcing the launch of the Sandra Olowo Foundation for Women in Business, aimed at empowering widows, single mothers, and women who had suffered betrayal or loss to rebuild their lives. The event drew journalists, business leaders, and government officials from across the region. Sandra stood before the cameras, radiant in a white gown that symbolized purity and renewal. "Years ago," she began, "I was a woman who believed love was enough to build trust. I was wrong. Love needs truth to survive. When trust is broken, it feels like the world is ending, but it's not. It's simply giving you a chance to start again." The audience was silent, captivated by her poise and honesty. She continued, "My journey taught me that women are far stronger than society allows us to believe. We can rise from ashes, rebuild empires, and rewrite our stories not as victims, but as victors." The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Journalists scribbled furiously. That moment marked the beginning of a new legacy, one born not from inheritance, but from resilience. Later that night, Sandra sat by the fireplace, her thoughts calm. The house, once a place of pain, now felt alive again. She picked up a photo of her parents from the mantelpiece, her mother's soft smile, her father's proud eyes. "I finally did it," she whispered to the photo. "I kept your legacy alive, but I also built my own." She placed the photo back and looked around her beautifully lit living room. For the first time, it didn't feel empty. It felt full of purpose, hope, and light. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Hellen. "Sandra, I'm sorry. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I pray you find it in your heart someday. You were the best friend I ever had." Sandra read it twice, then sighed deeply. She typed back slowly. "Hellen, I forgave you long ago. But forgiveness doesn't mean returning to the past. I wish you healing and peace." She sent the message and put the phone aside. A quiet smile touched her lips. The wound had finally closed. Weeks later, the Global Business Times featured her on its cover with the headline, "Sandra Olowo, the woman who turned betrayal into empire." The article praised her leadership, her new foundation, and her story of courage. She became a symbol of hope for many women across Africa, and beyond, a living testament that the end of love is not the end of life. One evening, as the sun set in hues of crimson and gold, Sandra hosted a small dinner at her home. Barrister Okon, Mr. Adewale, and a few loyal staff joined her. Laughter filled the air again. When the night drew to a close, Sandra raised her glass. "To new beginnings," she said softly. "To lessons that make us wiser, pain that makes us stronger, and love the kind that begins with ourselves." They all raised their glasses in agreement. As the sound of clinking glasses filled the room, Sandra looked up at the stars through the window and whispered one final promise to herself. I will never lose myself again for the sake of love. From now on, love will rise to meet me, not the other way around. And for the first time in a very long time, Sandra truly felt free. Summary. Sandra Olowo, the only daughter of a wealthy family, inherited her late parents' multi-billion naira empire and estate. Deeply in love with her husband, Kenneth, she entrusted him with full control of her businesses, believing their 5-year marriage was built on trust and devotion. But one ordinary day, while using his laptop, Sandra stumbled upon a shocking message. Kenneth and his lawyer friend were finalizing plans to divorce her and seize her wealth. Broken yet calm, she chose silence over confrontation, secretly gathering evidence. Her investigation revealed that her husband had replaced her company's loyal staff and was building a hidden empire with her best friend, Hellen. The ultimate betrayal shattered her world. With the help of her lawyer, Sandra regained legal control of her assets and exposed Kenneth and Hellen publicly. Humiliated, Kenneth lost everything, and Hellen begged for forgiveness. Sandra rose above revenge, reclaiming her father's legacy and founding the Sandra Olowo Foundation for Women in Business to empower others who had been betrayed. Through strength, intelligence, and grace, she transformed heartbreak into victory, proving that true power lies not in wealth, but in resilience, dignity, and self-belief.